It was a Sunday evening in Chicago. The date was November 22nd, 1987. Families were gathered in their living rooms. The day was winding down. On television, the 9 o'clock news was on. WGN-TV sportscaster Dan Roan was talking about the Chicago Bears. He was giving a recap of their victory over the Detroit Lions. Everything felt normal. It was just another night in a big American city. The world outside the television screen was predictable. The news report was a familiar ritual, a comforting end to the weekend. People trusted what they saw on their screens. The broadcast was proceeding without a hitch. Roan spoke with professional ease, his voice a steady presence in thousands of homes. The graphics on the screen were simple, typical of the 1980s. The world of sports provided a gentle distraction from the complexities of life. Viewers felt a sense of connection to their city through these shared moments. They settled deeper into their sofas, maybe with a late snack. The television was a window to the world, but a safe one. It was a curated reality, one that was controlled and understood. No one expected that window to be shattered. Suddenly, the screen flickered. A strange buzzing sound cut through the air. For a brief moment, the picture dissolved into blackness. Then, just as quickly, an image appeared. It was not Dan Roan. It was something else entirely. A figure wearing a strange rubbery mask. He had wild eyes and a manic grin. He was jerking back and forth in front of a corrugated metal background. The change was so abrupt, so bizarre, that many viewers probably thought their television sets were broken. It was a rupture in the fabric of their ordinary Sunday night. The intrusion lasted only for about 25 seconds. Then, just as mysteriously as it had appeared, it was gone. The engineers at WGN-TV managed to switch their broadcast to another transmitter, cutting the hijacker off. Dan Roan reappeared on the screen, looking slightly confused. He said, "Well, if you're wondering what's happened, so am I." He tried to continue his report, but the spell of normalcy had been broken. The strange figure had left a lingering sense of unease. A question hung in the air of every living room. What on earth was that? The first incident was just a rehearsal, a strange fleeting moment of chaos. Most people who saw it might have dismissed it. Perhaps it was a technical fault, a strange prank from someone at the station. But the night was not over. The real performance was yet to come. The hijacker or hijackers were waiting for a bigger stage. They found it about 2 hours later. This time their target was WTW, Chicago's public broadcasting station. It was a station known for its serious programming, a place people turned to for thoughtful content. At around 11:15 p.m, WTTW was broadcasting an episode of the classic science fiction show Doctor Who. The episode was The Horror of Fang Rock. It was a fitting choice in retrospect, a story of suspense and unknown terror. Viewers were engrossed in the Doctor's adventure. They were in a world of fiction, a safe kind of scary. The familiar hum of the television set filled the room. The show provided a comfortable escape, but reality was about to become far stranger than the fiction on the screen. The broadcast signal was vulnerable. It was an invisible highway through the air, and someone had found a way to merge into its lane. The screen went black. The familiar theme music of Doctor Who vanished. It was replaced by a harsh grating sound, a wall of static and buzzing. Then the figure returned. He was wearing the same mask, a grinning plastic face meant to look like Max Headroom. Max Headroom was a famous character at the time, a computer-generated TV host known for his stuttering, witty remarks. He was a symbol of the slick, futuristic 1980s. But this was a twisted version, a dark parody. This figure was not witty. He was menacing. This time, the hijacking was longer. It was more deliberate. The engineers at WTW were caught completely off guard. Their transmitter was located at the top of the Sears Tower, the tallest building in the world at the time. It was supposed to be secure, but the hijackers had found a way to overpower its signal. They had aimed their own powerful microwave signal at the tower's antenna. The engineers in the control room could only watch helplessly. Their screens showed the same bizarre images that viewers were seeing at home. They were locked out of their own broadcast. The figure in the mask began to speak. His voice was distorted, electronically altered. It was high-pitched and garbled. He seemed to be mocking the WGN news broadcast from earlier. He mumbled something about a frickin' liberal. He held up a can of Pepsi, a nod to the real Max Headroom's advertisements. He hummed the theme song to the cartoon Clutch Cargo. His words were a stream of consciousness, a strange collection of inside jokes and pop culture references. It was like listening to a secret language, a code that no one else could understand. The visuals were just as chaotic as the audio. The figure moved erratically. He danced and swayed in front of the spinning metal background. The camera work was shaky. It gave the impression of a low-budget homemade production. This was not a professional broadcast. It was something raw and unfiltered, something that felt dangerous because of its unpredictability. The mask itself was unsettling. It was a cheap imitation, a grotesque caricature. The fixed, smiling expression seemed to hide something deeply disturbed underneath. It was the face of a digital ghost. His strange monologue continued. He made a reference to WGN sportscaster Chuck Swirsky. He claimed Swirsky was a frill. He held up a rubber glove and said, "My brother is wearing the other one." His actions became more and more bizarre. He seemed to be performing for an audience of one, or perhaps for a small group of friends who were in on the joke. But his performance was being broadcast to thousands of unsuspecting people. For them, it was not funny. It was deeply unnerving, a violation of the safety of their own homes. The intrusion felt like it would never end. The figure's energy was frantic, manic. He seemed to be building towards some kind of climax. The distorted audio screeched and buzzed. The image flickered and rolled. It was a direct assault on the senses, a deliberate attempt to create confusion and discomfort. This was not just a prank. It was a carefully constructed piece of performance art, a piece designed to shock and to disturb. It was a message from the fringes, beamed directly into the mainstream, and no one knew what it meant. The second broadcast intrusion was far more disturbing than the first. It lasted for about 90 seconds, an eternity on live television. The figure's actions grew stranger, more unsettling. After his strange, rambling speech, he bent over. He was out of the camera's view for a moment. Then he reappeared, holding up the rubber glove again. He seemed to be making strange, suggestive gestures. The context was lost, but the feeling it created was one of deep unease. It felt like a violation, a private, strange ritual being performed in public. The scene then took an even more bizarre turn. The figure disappeared from the screen again. Someone else appeared, a person wearing what looked like a French maid's costume. This second person was holding a fly swatter. The masked figure's bare buttocks were then exposed to the camera. The person in the costume began to spank him with the fly swatter. The masked figure screamed and moaned in a distorted, high-pitched voice. It was a moment of pure, inexplicable chaos, a scene that defied all logic and reason. This final act was the one that truly terrified many viewers. It was not just a strange man talking. It was a scene of simulated violence and humiliation. It was confusing and deeply uncomfortable to watch. Parents who were watching with their children rushed to turn off their televisions. The sense of a harmless prank was gone. This felt different. It felt darker. It felt like a glimpse into a world that was supposed to remain hidden. A world of strange fetishes and private fantasies now made terrifyingly public. The fly swatter became a symbol of the incident's weirdness. The broadcast ended abruptly after this scene. The screen went to black. The hijacker's signal finally cut out. WTTW returned to a blank screen for a few moments before normal programming resumed, but the damage was done. The image of the masked man and the fly swatter was burned into the minds of everyone who saw it. It was a moment that broke all the rules of television. It showed that the barrier between the viewer and the broadcaster was not as solid as everyone believed. Anyone, it seemed, could take control, and no one knew what they might do. The visual element of the Max Headroom incident was undeniably shocking, but the sound was just as crucial to its terrifying effect. The audio was a landscape of distortion. It was a symphony of static, buzzing and electronic squeals. It was honestly the sound of a signal being tortured. The hijacker's voice was put through a modulator, which made it unnaturally high and difficult to understand. The words were garbled, as if they were bubbling up from some deep electronic abyss. The sound was designed to disorient the listener. Imagine for a moment the typical sounds of a 1980s television, the low hum of the cathode ray tube, the familiar voices of news anchors and actors, the carefully mixed audio of a television show. The Max Headroom incident shattered that sonic comfort. It replaced it with a harsh grating noise, a sound that felt like an attack. It was not just noise, it was the sound of a system breaking down, the sound of control being lost. For viewers at home, this audio chaos really amplified the sense of panic. It made the experience feel more immediate, more threatening. There were layers to the sound. Underneath the distorted voice and the static, there was a low, rhythmic humming. This was likely the sound of the equipment being used for the hijacking, and it gave the broadcast an industrial, almost mechanical feel. It was as if a machine had come to life and was speaking in its own strange language. The sounds were not random. They were part of the performance. They helped to build the atmosphere of dread. The buzzing was like an angry insect trapped inside the television set. The moments of screaming and moaning at the end were the most disturbing. They were processed through the same distortion filter, which made them sound inhuman. They were the cries of a digital ghost, a tormented entity trapped in the broadcast signal. The sound alone was enough to create a sense of deep fear. It bypassed the rational part of the brain and tapped directly into a primal sense of danger. The sound of the Max Headroom incident was the sound of the uncanny, the sound of something familiar being twisted into something terrifying. The next morning, Chicago woke up to the news. The broadcast hijacking was, well, the talk of the town. It was on the front page of the newspapers. It was the lead story on the radio. Everyone was asking the same questions. Who did this and why? The city was in a state of collective shock. People had seen strange things on television before, but this was different. This was a direct invasion. It felt personal. It felt like someone had broken into their homes through the television screen. The Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, immediately launched an investigation. So did the FBI. They treated the incident as a serious federal crime. Broadcasting a pirate signal is illegal. It can interfere with emergency communications. But this was more than just a technical violation. The content of the broadcast made it a matter of public concern. The authorities were determined to find the people responsible. They offered rewards for information. They interviewed station employees. They analysed the recording of the broadcast frame by frame. For the people of Chicago, the incident created a new kind of paranoia. Suddenly, the television was not just a source of entertainment, it was a potential source of fear. People started to look at their screens with a new sense of suspicion. Could it happen again? What would they show next time? The incident exposed a vulnerability that no one had really considered before. The airwaves, which seemed so public and so controlled, were actually quite fragile. This realization was unsettling. It changed the relationship between the viewer and the medium. The story spread far beyond Chicago. It became a national and then an international news story. It was a perfect story for the media. It was strange, mysterious, and a little bit scary. It captured the imagination of the public. The Max Headroom incident became a piece of modern folklore, a cautionary tale about the dark side of technology. It was a reminder that for all our progress, we are still vulnerable to chaos. The city of Chicago held its breath, waiting for an answer. But the answer never came. The investigation into the Max Headroom incident was extensive, but it led nowhere. The culprits were never identified. They seemed to have vanished into thin air. Over the years, many theories have emerged. Each one tries to explain the mystery. Each one offers a different portrait of the people behind the mask. But without any concrete evidence, these theories remain just that, speculation. The identity of the hijackers is the central unanswered question of this strange story. It is a puzzle with no solution. The most common theory is that it was a prank, a group of technologically savvy pranksters or hackers. Perhaps they were part of the burgeoning freaking community, people who explored and experimented with telecommunication systems. In this view, the incident was a kind of high-tech graffiti, a way to show off their skills and to mock the establishment. The references to pop culture and the inside jokes seem to support this theory. It suggests the hijackers were young, clever and rebellious. They wanted to cause a little chaos, but not to cause any real harm. Another theory points to a disgruntled employee, perhaps someone who used to work for WGN-TV. This would explain the specific reference to sportscaster Chuck Swirsky. Maybe the hijacker had a personal grudge. Maybe they felt they had been wronged by the station. This theory adds a layer of personal revenge to the story. It makes the incident less of a random act and more of a targeted attack. However, no former employees with the technical knowledge and the motive were ever identified as strong suspects. The trail went cold. A more elaborate theory suggests the involvement of an art collective, a group of performance artists who wanted to make a statement about media and consumer culture. Max Headroom himself was a critique of corporate media. By creating a dark, twisted version of him, the artists could have been making a powerful point. The chaotic, nonsensical nature of the broadcast could be seen as a commentary on the absurdity of modern television. This theory elevates the incident from a simple prank to a piece of deliberate, subversive art. It is an appealing idea, but one that is impossible to prove. The Max Headroom incident did not happen in a vacuum. It was a product of its time. The 1980s was a decade of rapid technological change. Personal computers were becoming common. The internet was in its infancy. A new digital culture was emerging. This culture had a mischievous and sometimes anarchic spirit. The incident was an early example of what we now call hacking. It was a sign that the digital world could spill over into the real world in unpredictable ways. It was a warning from the future. The incident has had a lasting cultural impact. It has been referenced in countless television shows, movies and books. It has become a shorthand for technological disruption and mysterious unsolved events. The image of the grinning, glitchy mask is instantly recognizable to a generation of people. It represents a moment when the familiar world of television was turned upside down. The incident entered the realm of urban legend, a story told and retold each time with a little more mystery and a little more dread. For those who study media, the incident is a fascinating case study. It raises important questions about who controls the flow of information. It demonstrates the power of broadcast media to shape public perception and emotion. The hijacking was a brief but powerful reminder that the media landscape is a contested space. It showed that alternative voices, no matter how strange or disturbing, can find a way to break through the noise. It was a crack in the smooth facade of corporate media, a glitch in the system that revealed the system's weaknesses. The legacy of the incident is also one of fear. It tapped into a deep-seated anxiety about technology, the fear that our own creations could be turned against us, the fear of the unknown. The incident showed that a powerful tool like television could be used for purposes that were not intended. It could be used to confuse, to frighten and to disturb. This fear has not gone away. In our modern world of deepfakes and cyber attacks, the lessons of the Max Headroom incident are more relevant than ever. The static still echoes. Today, more than 3 decades have passed since that strange Sunday night in Chicago. The world has changed in ways that would have been unimaginable in 1987. The internet has transformed every aspect of our lives. Television is no longer the dominant medium it once was, and yet the mystery of the Max Headroom incident endures. The case remains open. The culprits have never been brought to justice. They have never come forward to claim responsibility. Their silence is perhaps the most unsettling part of the story. The lack of resolution leaves us with a lingering sense of unease. We are left to wonder about the motives of the people behind the mask. Were they just pranksters who got scared and decided to lay low? Or was there something more sinister at play? The ambiguity is what makes the stories so powerful. It allows our imaginations to fill in the blanks. And our imaginations often conjure up scenarios that are far more frightening than the truth might be. The unsolved nature of the crime turns it into a modern ghost story. The incident serves as a strange monument in the history of broadcasting, a bizarre footnote that refuses to be forgotten. It reminds us of a time when the boundaries of technology were still being explored. It was a time of both excitement and anxiety. The Max Headroom hijacking perfectly captured that dual spirit. It was both technically brilliant and deeply childish. It was both funny and terrifying. It was a contradiction wrapped in static and delivered to an unsuspecting audience. The mystery is a permanent feature of its legacy. In the end, we are left where we started, in a state of confusion, just like sportscaster Dan Roan on that November night. The signal was hijacked, a strange performance was broadcast, and then it was over. All that remains is a grainy recording and a set of unanswered questions. The Max Headroom incident is a cold case, a puzzle that will likely never be solved. It is a reminder that sometimes chaos wins. Sometimes there are no easy answers. Sometimes the static is the only message there is and we are left alone in the dark wondering what we just saw.